Hello and welcome. Today, we are diving deep into the story of one of the world's most ancient and, frankly, most resilient civilizations. We're going to explore the ideas, the events, and the core structures that allowed it to not just survive, but to truly flourish for thousands upon thousands of years. Okay, let's get right into it.
So what's the secret sauce, right? How do you build a culture, a society that can handle invasions, massive internal changes, and just the sheer weight of time? That's the huge question we're tackling today as we look at the foundational pillars that held up Indian civilization.
And to do that, we have to start where it all began. We're going way back to the very first city dwellers who laid down the cultural bedrock more than 5,000 years ago.
I mean, think about this. Long before the Roman Empire was even a thought, before the Great Pyramids of Giza were finished, this incredibly sophisticated urban civilization was thriving in the Sindhu or Indus Valley. It was a whole world of organized cities and bustling trade, but it's still wrapped in mystery. We still can't read their writing.
But what we have found tells such a cool story. I mean, this was not some primitive society. Archaeologists have dug up artifacts that just scream sophistication. They had this deep appreciation for beauty and personal care. We're talking jewelry made from semi-precious stones, cosmetics, super intricate ivory combs, and even little dressing tables. From the very beginning, this was a culture of real refinement.
So, this brings us to our first pillar, the imperial idea. After centuries of smaller kingdoms warring with each other, this new ambition started to grow. The idea of bringing this vast, diverse subcontinent under one single central government. And nobody realized this ambition quite like the Mauryan Empire, and specifically its most famous ruler, Emperor Ashoka. But his path to becoming this legendary, benevolent king, well, it started with an act of absolutely shocking brutality.
150,000. Just let that number sink in for a second. That's how many people were taken captive when Ashoka conquered the kingdom of Kalinga. The war was so bloody, so completely devastating, that the horror of what he had done changed him and the course of Indian history forever.
And this is the pivot point. It was a complete 180. Ashoka totally abandoned the policy of blood and iron that had built his empire in the first place. Instead, he embraced a whole new way of ruling based on dharma, this powerful idea of moral law, of doing the right thing, of your duty to the world. All of a sudden, his goal wasn't more land, it was the well-being of every single person and creature in his kingdom.
And you can hear this change in his own words, which is just incredible. He had them carved into rock for everyone to see. He said his job wasn't about power for himself, but that he owed a debt to all living things. I mean, what a revolutionary way for a king to think about his job.
Okay, so that's the political pillar. But what was going on in the hearts and minds of the people? That brings us to pillar number 2, the deep, profound, spiritual, and philosophical quest that has always been at the absolute core of this civilization.
And to really get a feel for this, check out this contrast. In ancient Egypt, when they grappled with death, what did they do? They focused on preserving the physical body, which gave us the pyramids. But ancient India took a totally different route. They focused on the immortal soul, which gave us the Upanishads, these timeless philosophical texts that are all about understanding the nature of the spirit.
And this philosophy wasn't just some abstract idea for scholars to debate. It was a literal blueprint for how to live a good life. The ideal life was broken down into 4 stages, or ashramas. You journey from being a student to a householder with family duties, and then gradually withdraw for reflection, and finally complete spiritual renunciation. It was a roadmap for a complete life. So what was the final destination on this journey? What was the ultimate goal? This line from the Upanishads just nails it. The point wasn't just to worship some faraway god. The goal was to reach a state of enlightenment so total, so complete, that your individual soul actually merges with the entire universe. You don't just find God, you become God.
So you've got this huge imperial idea and this incredibly deep spiritual quest. But how do you hold it all together in daily life? How do you organize society? Well, that brings us to our third pillar, the social fabric.
One of the key threads in that fabric was the idea of samskaras. You can think of them as sacred rites of passage. These were ceremonies that marked every major milestone in a person's life, literally from before birth all the way to death. It was a way of making the entire human journey feel structured, sacred, and meaningful. And we're not just talking about big, once-in-a-lifetime events. It included ceremonies we can all recognize, celebrating a new baby being born,
the official naming of the child, even that special moment when a baby gets its first taste of solid food. It was about finding the sacred in the everyday.
Now, you might be wondering, where do women fit into this picture? Well, it's complicated. In the earlier periods, you had these amazing figures like the philosopher Maitreyi, who was right there in the thick of deep intellectual debates. By the time a Greek ambassador named Megasthenes visited around 300 BC, he noted that some women did pursue philosophy. So it shows that even though things might have been changing, the door to education and influence for women wasn't completely shut. All right, on to our fourth and final pillar, the incredible cultural legacy. This is the tangible stuff, the breathtaking art, the mind-boggling architecture, and the powerful ideas that spread far, far beyond the borders of the subcontinent.
102. What in the world is that? Well, it's the number of hospitals built across the Kingdom of Cambodia, which is modern-day Cambodia, by King Jayavarman VII back in the 12th century. This is just an amazing example of those Indian ideals of public welfare, inspired by people like Ashoka, being put into practice thousands of miles from home.
And that influence is quite literally set in stone. The cultural legacy gave us some of the most stunning structures on the planet. I mean, let's take a quick tour. You've got the powerful Martanda Sun Temple high in the mountains of Kashmir, the absolutely massive stupa of Borobudur in Java, and of course the legendary, sprawling temple city of Angkor Wat in Cambodia. Just incredible.
Wow. Okay, so after that whirlwind tour through thousands of years, what's the takeaway? Let's try to pull all these different threads together.
When you really boil it down, the story of this civilization is a story of facing immense challenges. It saw waves of invaders, it had deep, painful internal conflicts, but its defining characteristic, its superpower, was this incredible ability to assimilate. Its deep philosophical roots and its flexible social structures allowed it to absorb new people and new ideas, to bend without ever breaking.
And that brings us right back to where we started. We've talked about these four pillars: the unifying political idea, the deep spiritual quest, the resilient social fabric, and the powerful cultural legacy. They all work together. But I'll leave you with this question to think about. Which one do you think is the most important for a civilization's long-term survival? Is it the power of the state, the depth of its philosophy, the strength of its community, or the beauty of its art? It's something worth pondering. Thanks so much for joining us.